go, shared, and hopefully it'll pop up. All right, so let's define what 14A and B says, right? So 14 says, time period, removal of contingencies and cancellation rights. The following time periods may only be extended, altered, modified, or changed, okay, by mutual written agreement. Any removal of contingencies or cancellations under this paragraph by either buyer or seller must be exercised in good faith and must also be included on the CR form, the contingency removal and the cancellation of contract as well, okay? Now, what I like about this is that the RPA, it applies the active method of contingency removal, not the passive method. Silence does not make the contingency just go away, nor create a cancellation. Contingency removal must be in writing to be effective. Further, none of the time periods may be altered, changed, except in writing. Any removal of cancellation must be done in good faith, okay? So what it says here is very common sense, in my opinion, is that anything that we do must be in writing, right? I cannot verbally say, look, the buyer is going to release a physical inspection, okay? I'm going to text you that the buyer is going to release physical inspection, appraisal, or loan contingency. That doesn't work. They cannot use that as an ammunition and say, look, I have a text that says that you have released the contingency. Doesn't work that way. There's a proper form, and that proper form is the CR form, contingency removal. Contingency removal, okay? That's the only way you can navigate and release. And it has to be physically written and sent over to the opposing agent as well, okay? Now, 14A says seller delivery of documents. Seller shall, within the time specified in paragraph 3N1, deliver to buyer all reports, disclosures, and information. Reports for which seller is responsible or in possession. In paragraph 7A, 9B, 610, 11A, 11B, 11C, so on and so forth, okay? So what it says here is that section 14A, paragraph 3.1 gives seller 7 days unless a different time is filled in. Remember, the purchase agreement already has a default amount of 7 days that the seller must provide any seller disclosures, right? Now, if that is modified, that's mutually agreed upon between both the buyer and the seller. But it's already defaulted that after acceptance of the offer, meaning mutual signatures by all parties have been given and the opposing agent has a copy of it, then that starts the trajectory of a 30-day, a 45, or even a 15-day period, okay? What this section here says that the seller within the time specified has 7 days after acceptance that the seller will provide the buyer with any and all disclosures. And if the seller doesn't provide you with the disclosures within the time period, then the buyer can send a notice to perform to the seller. And if the seller still doesn't perform within 48 hours of receiving the notice to perform, the buyer has the right to cancel. Okay. And that's what it says here. 7 days unless otherwise different on the time filled in on the option blank line to provide the buyer with the item specified. 11 different paragraphs. If the buyer does not get the information the seller contractually agrees to provide, buyer must notify the seller using the notice to seller to perform, NSP. While this form cannot make the seller perform, it may provide a non-threatened manner to inform the seller of the contractual obligations he or she or they have if the seller still does not provide the necessary documentations after the time period and the notice to seller to perform. The buyer then has the right to cancel if the buyer, if the seller does not perform. That's what section 14A states. Okay. Now, section 14B, which is one of the most important vitals of mutually canceling if you represent the buyer, is defined on 14B. 14B says the following. Buyer review of documents, repairs, requests, contingency removal, or cancellation. So this is the time that the buyer has the time to do any and all physical inspections. Okay, they can do a general inspection. They can do a roof inspection, plumbing inspection, sewer inspection, electrical inspection, foundation inspection, anything and all. Okay, within the time specified. Now, that default amount is 17 days. Why is this important? When I'm having a conversation with the buyer, the first thing that the buyer will always ask, if we submit an offer gets accepted, we decide we don't want the property, can we back out of the deal without losing our deposit? The answer is yes. And the answer is maybe. It depends on what you do originally, right? Because how many times have you been in a scenario where the seller says, look, we'll consider your offer, but it's subject to you releasing the physical inspection immediately? Okay, because it's a very competitive property, meaning there's multiple buyers also wanting this property. So now the seller can cherry pick and says, look, I can choose what I want because I have options. And those options mean is, look, if you're willing to do this, I might consider your offer. If you're willing to do that, I might consider your offer. Because ultimately the seller has the upper advantage. I hate to say it this way, but the seller does if they have multiple offers. Now, there's a couple of things you can do as a buyer and a buyer agent to safeguard your client's deposit, right? Instead of releasing, you can do a less time frame, meaning instead of 17 days to release physical inspection or automatically release it, we'll do a 5, a 7, or a 10, or a 12-day inspection. That means that you definitely have to get all of the inspections, make the calls, make the commitments, and get everyone to either do it in 1 or 2 days. If that means back to back to back, that's fine. You can get a general inspection, you can get a sewer inspection, you can get a roof inspection done same day. It's not going to interfere with their work because someone is going to be doing their roof inspection, someone can be doing the chimney inspection, right? It doesn't matter. If you can align everyone to do at home in a couple of days, even better. Because peace of mind, the buyer has done their due diligence, but ultimately know the overall condition of the property. Okay. We as brokers never recommend that the buyer automatically release that as part of the contingency, okay? Because it's a red flag. It's a concern, because if the buyer does decide to back out, well, what are they going to use as a avenue of cancellation? They can use that the property is in bad condition when they release the physical inspection. The seller and the listing agent may say, well, no, that's not a good reason. Therefore, we're going to try to go after your deposit. Well, Simon, we still have other we have other contingencies in place. Yeah, you do. So you got to really know and understand what the cancellation is. Is it going to be based on the loan? Is it going to be based on the appraisal? Is it going to be based on seller disclosures? Or is it going to be based on physical inspections, meaning inspections of the property? Okay. Any questions on 14A? 14B. Okay. And it illustrates here. Now, 14B, I have a passion for this paragraph because all of your answers are on there. It tells you what to do next, what to do after, right? After the buyer does their inspections, right? Then it's time of the essence. Meaning if you have 17 days to do all of your inspections, do not wait till the last minute to do your inspections on the 17th day. You're shooting yourself on the foot. Okay. You want to be proactive. You want to do it immediately after acceptance. If your offer gets accepted today, you start scheduling inspections immediately, that same day or at least the following day. Obviously, you want to coordinate with your buyer because the buyer may want to be there as part of their inspection, and that's perfectly fine. They can be there, okay?
But the 17 days is for the inspection, the answer to the seller is not complete.
That's correct. Mhm. So you have 17 days to do any and all inspections.
Then leave the answer to the seller the 19 days.
If the seller what, I'm sorry?
Leave the answer to the seller the 19 days.
Well,
That's not
you're playing roulette there, okay? You don't want to wait on the 17 days, then send out a request for repairs. The reason is if you have a very savvy listing agent, an experienced agent, they're not going to wait till the 17-day to send you the notice to perform or the contingency removal. Remember, the contract is very defined and it's in black and white, and it says the following: that the seller and the listing agent can send you the contingency removal on the 15th day of a 17-day. Okay, doesn't mean that you as the buyer have to release it on the 15th. You still have your 17 days to release that as a condition. Or let's just say that it's 10-day physical inspection. That means that the seller on the 8th day can send you the notice to perform and also the CR releasing the contingency.
How long does it take for these companies to do an answer? The report of the
It depends on what company you use. Part of your responsibility is to make sure that, hey, if we use your home inspection company, what's the turnaround on getting that report back to us? That's vital. That's important. Because if a company is going to take 3 to 5 days, that's 3 to 5 days that you've lost. And now you're in the mercy. But if a company says we can get your report the same day or within 24 hours, okay. It all depends on how much time you have. 17 days, believe it or not, may seem like a lot, but it's really not. Because it also counts towards your weekends as well, Saturday and Sundays. So 17 days can go that quick. So I urge you, the faster you get all your inspections, the better. Because now the buyer cannot come back to you and says, look, I wish I would have had more time to do what I needed to do. So absolutely. You should already have your ally of companies that you choose. You should already have a company for your general inspection. You should already have a sewer inspection. You should already have someone that you can do a general structure. If the house is on a raised foundation, the home is 100 years old, you want to get someone in there that they can see the integrity of the property. Because older homes tend to lean, tend to crack, and it's not always as level. Absolutely. Earthquake is a big factor. We live in the state of California. So all of these are vital. A chimney is another example too. If the chimney is 75, 80 years old, it may have some internal issues with it. You want to get a chimney inspection done so that way you can see the integrity of the chimney. Well, the chimney also is where the Santa Claus comes out, right? So again, as your responsibility doing your due diligence and protecting your client's best interests is you got to provide them with any and all. And the seller cannot say no to any of your inspections as long as they're done in a timely manner. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. I have a question from Robert. I've heard lawyers advise agents not to be present during any inspections due to the risk of management reasons. Can you expand on this so everyone understands the risks involved? Okay, so here's my thought on this. There's certain things you should, and there's certain things you shouldn't be involved in, okay? A physical inspection, you don't necessarily have to be there, but it is vital to do so. And what I mean by that is you want to know, because you're lining yourself up for what that request of repairs. Remember, three things can happen. One, the buyer can send a request of repairs. Two, the buyer in lieu of repairs can ask for a credit. Or three, the buyer can ask for a price reduction. Or better yet, the buyer can ask for all three simultaneously, meaning fix this, give me credit, and I also want a price reduction. Okay. So in my personal opinion, if you're the buyer's agent representing a buyer, it is to your advantage to be there, not on top of the general inspection being done, right? But be there so that way, if there is any concerns or questions that arise, well, you're going to note it, because ultimately you still got to do your ABIT, right? Your agent visual inspection. So this gives you some segue and headway also to prepare for your ABIT as well. Now, when it comes to other types of situations, such as an appraisal, okay? And I'm going to use an appraisal as an example. There's really no reason for a buyer and a buyer's agent to be there, okay? It should be really the sellers or the listing agent being involved, because typically they will provide the necessary comps if they feel that we may be pushing it when it comes to the comps, right? Really, I never recommend that a buyer be part of that, just because the seller or the listing agent should have, you know, enough data or information to be able to present to the appraisal. And sometimes it depends on the appraisal too. The appraisal may say, look, I don't need any of your comparables. There's some nice appraiser and there's some really nasty ones too that says, look, I already know, I've been doing this 40, 50 years. I've done my research. I know exactly what I need to do. There's no need for you to provide me, but it doesn't hurt to have it, because I know for a fact, just like real estate agents, an opinion of value, right? Because if I get all of you to give me a value on a property, guess what's going to happen? All of you are going to give me a different opinion of value. And it's no difference.
One time you told me, I don't know this area, I work in that area.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and you're going to get scenarios where it's an out of area appraisal that they don't know. One street can make a big difference in price, but it's no difference than an appraiser going there as well.
Can I not accept?
Well, you cannot, but the seller or the buyer can audit and say, look, you know what, I think these numbers are incorrect. If you have legitimate comps to back up your case, yeah, you can present it. Absolutely. Okay. But going back to what I was saying is that even an appraisal, if I get 4 appraisals done, licensed appraisals, they're going to give me 4 different answers too. They're not going to be exactly, okay, because it's an opinion of value. So going back to your question, Robert, on advising if the buyers, I'm assuming, see, I've heard lawyers advising agents not to be present during inspections due to risk management reasons. Okay, so pros and cons, you know. Again, my personal is it's perfectly fine. Attorneys may see it differently, is because what if the agent goes in there and hurts themselves, right? The less time that you can be on a property, the more likelihood that there may be a situation or issue, right? Now, typically, when there's an inspection, you know, you need to be in dialogue and communications with the listing agent. For example, hey, Jennifer, you know, my clients set in a time to do an inspection on your listing. Will Thursday at 4 p.m. work for you and your clients? Jennifer's going to say, yeah, I think it's going to work. I can ask, Jennifer, are you going to be present when we do that or not? I want to know, so I need to know who is going to be present as well, right? Because I've seen in the past where people get injured and hurt, where we have a case right now where a Murphy bed fell on a stager, and now the individual that got hurt is suing the homeowner and is trying to sue the company as well. The staging company is trying to sue the homeowner and the real estate company as well, even though we had nothing to do with it. And what's so ironic is the Murphy bid was not even the staging company, it was the actual homeowner's property. Unfortunately, it was not bolted to the wall. So what had happened was the lady ultimately was trying to bring it down and the whole thing fell on her and injured her pretty bad. So again, these little things can blow up and ultimately cause a big lawsuit, you know, where there's compensation and money being involved. Okay. All right, let's continue. So section 14C says seller's right to cancel. All right, so here is the position from a seller and the position of a buyer. And then the contingencies in place. So let's see what it says. So 14C says this: seller right to cancel if the buyer does not do what the buyer promised to do, either remove contingency or cancel, the contract will remain in limbo unless the seller takes the affirmative action. Paragraph 14C gives the seller the opportunity to cancel after first giving the buyer a last chance to comply with the contract. Before the seller can cancel, the seller must first have given the buyer a notice to perform. Okay. So I just cannot, as a listing agent or a seller says, I'm going to cancel on you. Can't do that. You have to go through the proper channels. Okay. And the way you exit, because I hear this quite often, gosh, we accepted an offer, but another offer came in. Can I cancel with the first buyer because of the second buyer is offering 50,000 more than the offer I got in right now? Unfortunately, you're tied to that buyer. Until the buyer does not perform or decides to back out, that's the only avenue. Now, how you create that stickiness and stringent conditions is make sure you're on top of the timelines. Okay, does everyone know how many days after acceptance the buyer needs to put their deposit into escrow? Okay, 3
Simon, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So say the seller accepts a buyer's offer, and after the acceptance of the offer, they receive another higher offer for, say, 50,000 more. We're still obligated to present an even better offer after they've accepted one. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yeah. So even though you have an accepted offer with someone else, let's say offer A, your offer got accepted, right? Buyer and seller mutually signed the contract. And then hours later, you get another offer that it's higher. You must still present that to the seller. Doesn't mean that the seller can unilaterally just cancel with buyer A. They have to go through the motions and the buyer has to ultimately breach the contract in order for the seller to be able to go with buyer number 2. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, so that, I guess if they need to be more aggressive with their notice to performs, they know that they are able to risk losing their current buyer because they have a better offer that is pending or waiting.
Well, remember, you know, you got a very excited buyer too, that their offer got accepted too, you know, so you got to look at that from that angle. You know, you're not going to say, oops, we made a mistake. I have a better offer. We're going to cancel with you because I have an offer that's 50,000 more. Well, the buyer is going to say, well, wait a minute. You know what? Our offer got accepted and we want this property. Okay. I don't care if you got $100,000 offer higher than us. You know, we got a mutual sign agreement that you accepted our offer. Therefore, we're going to proceed. It's when the buyer defaults or breaches the contract, then the seller can cancel and go on with the next. Now, with that being said as well, you can put that buyer as a backup. Okay, you can put that as a backup. Look, I'm super sorry, but we already accepted an offer, but we're still within the time period that the buyer can do their inspections and overall satisfy themselves to the condition of the home. But if the buyer decides to cancel or if the buyer doesn't perform, then we'll cancel. I can put you as backup offer number 1, number 2, number 3. Would you be interested? And there's a form for that. If the buyer and the buyer agent says, yeah, absolutely, I want to be in first position. If the buyer currently doesn't perform, I want to be able to now slip right in and get into escrow. Now, this is where the listing agent has to be very savvy. Okay, one, you got to know your timelines, right? 3 days if the buyer hasn't sent the deposit, right? On the second day, you should already be sending the notice to perform if you really want to push this buyer. Now, you're going to piss off the buyer and the buyer's agent, but who cares? Because the ultimate goal is to take care of your client, the seller, best interest, right? And the reason you have to be aggressive is because, again, one, it's going to push the buyer to close or push the buyer to cancel. Okay, that's what it boils down to. Your job is just to navigate, make sure that the timelines fall into place. That's it. Okay. If the buyer fails, okay, put the property back on the market, put this new buyer into escrow. That's simple. Okay. So section 14C goes into this navigation of what do you need to do? You can't just say, Jennifer, I'm going to cancel with your clients. Okay, what's the reason? Well, there is no reason. I just want to cancel. Well, the buyer can definitely seek legal advice, and guess what the attorney is going to say? Well, let me see. I think we have a pretty good, strong case here. If the seller wants to press hard on cancel, we'll put a lease pendants against the property, tie up the property, see how the seller feels now. Now, I'm going way left field on this, but that has happened in the past. Don't be stuck in that situation. No one wins. Not the seller, not the buyer, not even the agents. And I have one right now going on for over 1.5 years that is still, the buyer and the seller cannot meet, cannot come to an agreement. They've been through mediation. They're trying to go through arbitrations. They've hired attorneys, and it's still on a standby. Okay, because the seller feels that the buyer breached and the buyer released any and all contingency. There's $180,000 of deposit. It was a huge property. I think it was $3 or $4 million deal. And the seller feels compelled to go after the entire deposit, which the contract in black and white says she should. But the buyer, on the other hand, says, nope, that's a lot of money. I'll give you $20,000. Okay, remember, mutual cancellation, meaning all parties have to come to an agreement. If there's no agreement, the money stays in escrow. Okay, any questions? All right, let's continue. All right, now let's talk about what the buyer's right to cancel, right? No difference than what the seller, but now it's the buyer's position. 14D as in David says the following: buyer right to cancel. Buyer has three rights to cancel in this paragraph. If the seller has not on time removed any seller contingencies, if seller has not on time taken contractual actions required by the purchase agreement, and if, for example, in good faith, the buyer is not satisfied with the condition of the property or the information provided by the seller concerns the property. Okay. So what it says here is that, again, the buyer has their right as well. Just like the seller, the buyer has the right to cancel. Buyer goes in, gets the offer accepted. Congratulations, we're in escrow, right? But the buyer also has the safe haven security that if nothing falls into place, meaning the home inspection is horrible, right? There's too many issues with the property. And the buyer is not willing to take on the responsibility of doing all that, or maybe too expensive. The buyer has the right to back out of the deal. Okay, this is all part of negotiations, ladies and gentlemen, all part of negotiations. Buyer may ask, seller may give. Buyer may ask, seller may say, nope, you're buying the property and as is condition. And it's already on the purchase agreement, folks. There's a section that the seller paragraph says that all property are sold in as is condition, meaning that the seller doesn't have to respond to the buyer's request or do any repairs whatsoever. as long as the seller discloses the condition of the property under the TDS, the SPQ, or an addendum. Okay, if the seller says, hey, I know that this house is eventually going to be collapsing because it's infested with termites, and that's disclosed, and the buyer goes and does their due diligence by getting a termite inspection, then the termite inspections company says, yeah, this wood and all this structure is pretty bad. You know, it's a matter of time before it collapses or a section collapse. Well, at least the buyer and the seller are in the awareness. And again, even so, the seller does not have to do any repairs whatsoever. Yes, Jennifer.
Health and safety.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, all properties, including that. How many times have you been involved, or maybe you haven't, but where the property needs to be torn down? Okay, as long as the seller discloses that this property will not qualify for a loan, it's a tear down. Does the seller have to do any hazardous issues, gas leaks or stuff of that nature? Well, you know, that goes above and beyond, because it's not just the scope of the property. Now you're also jeopardizing neighbors, right? And stuff of that significance. Well, yeah, I mean, common sense is, yeah, you're going to want to get the gas company to shut off the gas line. Or if it's a water situation where it's flooding, then eventually, yeah, because that can also jeopardize the neighborhood, the neighbor's property as well. That could be a situation as well. But we as a buyer, doesn't mean that the seller has to take care of it for us sake. Someone eventually can red flag the property, where if the buyer doesn't do it successfully and the seller doesn't do anything, the city may step in or the county may step in and flag the property and says, this house cannot, it's going to be condemned.
So the seller, if you have to smoke detector and carbon monoxide.
Yeah, that also depending on the situation, because if the property is going to be a tear down, or if the property is going to be renovated, most likely the new buyer, who's probably an investor, will probably get the updated system. It's required by law, it is. But if the seller says, I'm not going to take care of it, can you force the seller to do so? Well, it's a state law, it's a government law. I understand. But if you're going to be a stickler to that, okay, then maybe this property is not for you.
So you rent and cancel, but you're not. The smoke detector.
Again, you always want to do the right thing, and this is where agents need to know how to navigate. Now, common sense is, how much does it cost to put smoke detectors? Here, I'll pay for them, okay? I want to close this deal. Not a problem. I'll spend $40, $50 to put, 8 different smoke detectors, carbon monoxide. You do the right thing, right? Because sometimes buyer and sellers get into disputes and they don't want to do it. But again, that goes back to, properties are sold in this as is condition. Make sense? Someone else had a question? Oh, okay. Maybe it was just my eyes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so say I'm on the buyer side and we've done an inspection. We have 17 days investigation contingency. By day 10, we send in a repair request. Now, is the seller under any kind of obligation to respond and to say, hey, yeah, I'll fix half of this, or can they just say nothing and then just leave us with a decision?
Good question. The answer to that is the seller doesn't have to respond to you. They can be completely radio silent, meaning that day 10, day 11, day 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, and they can send you a contingency to remove without even bringing up your request. Unfortunately, the contract says that the seller does not have to respond in any way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, common practice is to always be in dialogue and communications, right? And this is where your job and responsibility as a real estate professional is to be in communications with the agent. For example, if I'm the buyer's agent and Jennifer is the listing agent, she's representing her clients, right? I'm representing the buyer on my process. I want to make sure that I'm in dialogue with Jennifer and making sure that, hey, Jennifer, I just want to make sure I sent over the request of repairs this afternoon. Can you please confirm that you received it? Okay. I'm going to get a response back. I'm hoping I get a response back from Jennifer. Jennifer may come back and says, yes, I'm in receipt of your request of repairs. I'm going to present it to the seller. Wonderful. How soon do you think we may get an answer? Jennifer's response is, I don't know. Okay. It may be the same day, it may be tomorrow, or it may be never. Okay, but I'm going to be on Jennifer to get an answer. Because if I don't get an answer, then I need to position my client is you either take it or leave it. Meaning, do you want this property that bad? I know it hits all the bells and whistles. You put in a request to do a repair, credit, or a price reduction. We're not hearing from the seller, and we can't force the agent or the seller to give us a response. What would you like me to do? Okay. Well, you know what? We love the property. We're willing to take the property as is. Wonderful. All right. Then I'm going to play hardball and not send out the contingency removal until Jennifer says, hey, where's my contingency removal, releasing any and all contingencies? Interesting. We asked for a request. I never got a response back. I'm not going to play that. You know, you want to keep it very professional, right? But that happens. Agents and their egos. I'm telling you, you guys are something else. Not you in particular, but in general. Let's play nice. Let's play nice. All right. Any other questions regarding buyer cancellation? All right, let's go to section 14E now. Notice to buyer and seller to perform. So now it breaks it down on what that means. So section 14E is in Edwards says the following. Notice to buyer and seller to perform. The purpose of the NBP is to prevent the buyer from being surprised by seller's attempt to cancel. And the purpose of the NSP is to prevent a seller from being surprised that the buyer did not get certain information and therefore wants to cancel. By delivering the notice to perform, there is a document establishes that no more time or delay will be allowed, and that the party is reinserting the need to comply with this contract. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, well, in plain and simple, it means that, hey, chop chop, let's do this. I need to know if you're in or out. I don't have time to wait. And more so, here's the problem that I've seen in the past. Agents being agents, they don't send the notice to perform. They don't send the contingency to remove. They're crossing their fingers and hoping that the buyer performs. Now we're going 30 days. Now we're going 35 days, 40 days, 45 days, 50 days. And the buyer cancels. And now the seller's pissed. One, we were supposed to close 30 days ago or 15 days ago, Simon. I want to go after the buyer's deposit. Now you got a big pill to swallow. And the reason I say this is because you were not engaged in doing the right thing and protecting your client's best interest. You never send the notice to perform or the contingency removal. So the buyer has all of their inspection contingencies, loan contingencies, appraisal contingencies, disclosures contingencies intact. And the buyer says, I changed my mind. And that happens. What do you think the seller is going to do to you? Well, I mean, shame on you for not doing the right thing, okay? Because now the seller is going to point fingers. Simon, did you really take care of my best interests? It doesn't seem like you did. We dragged it for 50 days. The buyer still has their contingencies in place. You never told me that they had to release contingencies. Why did we wait so long? And now the buyer backs out because they found something better for a lot less. And you're telling me I cannot go after the buyer's deposit? They're going to point fingers and they're going to point at you, unfortunately. So this is why it's vital, important to understand. And this is why 14A illustrates that position as noticed for the buyer and the seller to perform. Okay. And it goes both ways, ladies and gentlemen. If the seller is not performing, you send out that notice or get an extension, but at least you're in dialogue because sometimes you're going to need an extension. And that's fine as long as there's an agreement. If the buyer needs extra time, tell your seller. Simon needs extra time to release the loan contingency. They're asking us for 7 days. Are you okay with that? Is 7 days sufficient for them to close, or are they going to be asking for another? Well, I can ask. They only ask for 7 days. I can communicate with the buyer's lender and find out that they were asking for 7 days. Okay. We'll give it to them. All right. Then you prepare the extension time addendum, the ETA form. Now everything is in process, but more so, you got the paper trail that you need. Because you cannot remember what you did 2 months ago or a month ago, but you can remember when you pull the file and realize, okay, I did X, Y, and Z. Here's the extension. We gave an extension on so-and-so date, and we gave the extension for 7 days, and it looks like we send the cancellation, and ultimately, this is where we're at now. At least you have paper trail, folks. Now it's easier for me to articulate my position when I'm batting for you and your clients, because I have all the elements that I need to present a strong case on your client's behalf. I'm here to protect, but I'm here to also support you. And if we have to bat, we go to bat. But if I see missing documents, I'm going to do this. Come on, folks. Okay. Because it's going to be hard for me to really have a very strong, compelling argument. My goal is to help you, push you to the finish line, to close the deals. I do that often, where I navigate and ultimately get it to the finish line, because my number one goal is I want to get my agents paid. You work so darn hard for your commission, but I can't do my job if there's missing items. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Any questions on this paragraph? Yes, ma'am.
The notice to perform, does that include for like seller disclosures? 'Cause
Yeah.
I just realized
Absolutely.
day 6.
Absolutely. Yep.
Should I
So I
just,
have a question on the notice to perform.
Hold on 1 second, please. I'm sorry, Mickey.
should I just send an email first reaching out to the listing agent, be like, hey, I mean, I did yesterday, but.
Yeah.
Should I send her? She's kind of a pill.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to be proactive and make sure that you're sending the notice to perform. Yeah, I would definitely do so. I'm sorry. Okay, you had a question on Zoom?
Yeah, so the day that we can send out the notice to perform, say it's a 17-day contingency, do we send that out if nothing's happened by the 17th day? Is that when we send it, or do we send it 3 days before the contingency expires?
So the contract says any contingencies that you're requesting to be removed can be done 2 days prior.
2 days, okay. Oh, okay,
So if you say that a contingency defaults on 17 days, such as physical inspection, seller disclosures, appraisal, and loan, that falls already into, let me show you here on the purchase. It's not coming up. Okay, never mind. I have to, let me stop. And then let me re-engage. And where is my? Sorry. There we are. Okay. So let me just go to the section right here where it says section I. Where's section J? It says 5 days, 17 days, 17 days, 17 days. Okay, so these are what we say are the default contingency removal. And if you look at the far right, right here, removal or waiver of contingencies. All contingencies on L1 through L7 may be removed or waived by checking the appropriate box above or attach the contingency removal. So even though I check this off here, right? If I check this off, okay, it should automatically populate the buyer's contingency removal. The question is, what am I removing? Am I removing any and all, or am I removing a specific contingency? Okay. Now, as I stated before, is I'm opposed to releasing any contingency. I want the buyer to have the right to do all different types of inspections, reviewing, and making sure that they properly get the loan and that the property appraises of what you're making an offer. If you're making an offer $1 million, but the house is only worth 800,000, that's a huge discrepancy, right? Who's going to be paying the difference of that $200,000, right? Well, if you put it on the appraisal contingency, which illustrates on L2 here, this is awesome. I like this little paragraph here because in the past we had a right that the buyer is willing to pay up to a certain amount. Anything exceeding that, then the buyer's either out or we need to negotiate. What this section here says now is that the appraisal contingency based upon the value that it comes in at a minimum purchase price, right? If I make if I make an offer for $1 million, but there's concern regarding the appraisal, right? I may say that the buyer may be comfortable coming in 25 or 50,000. So if the appraised value comes in at 950 instead of $1 million, the buyer would be responsible for the difference. Anything above 50,000, then the buyer could say, I'm out. Or the buyer can say, look, I'm chipping in, I have some skin in the game. I'm taking a property that's less value than what I'm offering, but I still want this property. I'm willing to pay 50,000 of my money to make this deal work. But let's say that it's 75 or 100,000, right? Now we can ask the seller look, I'm in it. Are you willing to bend a little bit too? Or are you willing to go back to square one, put the property back on the market? And now you know that the appraisal is going to be an issue. Are you still going to keep it at $1 million? It's best to just work with the current buyer that you're in escrow with than start all over. Because the buyer, one, different personality, they're going to do their own inspections, and the buyer may back out too. It's a coin toss. So it would be to the best interest for the listing agent to work with this particular buyer and the buyer's agent. Okay, if that means bend a little bit to make it work, then bend a little bit. Remember, negotiations is the win-win and all, not me winning you or vice versa. Does that make sense? Okay, so going back to the question is all of these contingencies fall into play. Remember, this is the buyer's good faith deposit, right? These walls that protect this buyer's deposit are layers of contingency. Every time that the buyer releases the contingency means that the seller is closer and closer and closer to taking the buyer's deposit, okay? How does that happen? Is when the buyer releases all contingencies, now they're exposing the buyer's deposit, okay? That's why you have these layer of walls to protect, because if the loan doesn't get approved, the appraisal doesn't come in, the disclosures are not satisfactory to the buyer, then the buyer has an exit strategy to back out of the deal and still retain the right to their deposit. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to go through a couple more and, for the sake of time. This one, this is the purchase agreement. This is the RPA, purchase agreement.
They don't have the name of the phone. They have signatures on. I have no idea.
You come to me, okay? I'll give you the right acronym or right form, because there's so many different contracts. But the most important ones obviously is the RPA, because that's the vital, that's the one that creates deals. And then the listing agreement is, you know, the opportunity to have someone sell their home. Okay. All right. Now let me go back. And, you know, I apologize because what I should have done was I should have started from 1 to 4 and I kind of went from 10. So let me go here. I think this is the next one. All right. So the legal authorized signer. So the legal authorized signer many times is the person who's authorized to sign the contract. Is not actually the buyer or the seller. Paragraph 32B and 33B allow for the identity of a legal authorized signer. So this is more that if you are representing a trust or representing a corporation, an S Corp, C Corp, an LLC, that may be the authorized entity, right? Now, the entity is not the one that's going to sign, it's the individual. Someone has to be in charge or authorize or control, meaning that if I'm submitting an offer based on my corporation or a corporation, I need to make sure that I have the authority. And how do I acknowledge that? Well, I have to see the articles of incorporation as one, right? To see if my name comes out as a principal, managing member, vice president, president, CEO, treasurer, owner, whatever that title may be, right? If I see that that person is the authorized on behalf of the corporation, then that person will be able to sign on behalf of the agreement. And more so, title is going to want to have all this information because they're not going to be able to transfer title or ownership to the new buyer because there's a discrepancy in who is authorized to do so. Okay. And more so, I'm going to test you. Okay. And then this goes back to when you were going through your real estate school. Can someone under the age of 18 sign a contract? Why? Yeah, 100%. Someone that's not authorized and is under 18 is not an authorized party. They're still a child per se. So they don't have the authority to sign a contract. So it would be void. And that's exactly on a transaction. It didn't happen here, but it happened to one of our agents. The child who was 17 had a bank account that the mom had put money for 17 years. Now the mom was buying a property, but the mom, I think, was the authorized, but was able to pull money from the child's funds. Well, immediately escrow and title said, wait a minute, that party did not authorize, and more so that's a child. So there's a big dispute going on with that because they were using some of the money from the child's fund to put as a down payment in the remaining balance. And now that opened up a can of worms, thinking, well, I've been moving money left and right for years, but now that it's a real estate transaction, they put the brakes and says, well, one, it's a child's account. Two, do you have authorization to pull the money on behalf of the child? If he's 18, that changes the trajectory of it. Yeah. All right, cool. So let's go. There's another question. Some reason not to be present during inspections per chat got. Liability agent may want to avoid potential liability issues, but not attending. They may be able to distance themselves from unforeseen problems, discoveries during the inspection. The perception of influence, the agent might want to avoid any perception that they are trying to influence the inspection process or the inspector's finding, but not being present. They maintain a neutral position. I've always liked to be present, to learn and ask. Okay, I mean, that's a valid point, Robert, and thank you so much for sharing. I have a mixed emotions on this. I personally think it's best that I know, issues with the property. I don't think, again, as a neutral party, I'm involved in just the transaction aspect of it to navigate that. At the end, it's really the buyer's decision if they want to proceed with it, they're okay with the condition of the property, or stop, back out of the deal, or ask for credit, repairs, or a price reduction. But I don't think that I would ever put myself in the position and says, oh my gosh, this house is total chaos. I don't foresee that you should buy it. No, that's not my position to do so. And I wouldn't put myself in that, because what if you're wrong? Are you a contractor? Are you a plumber? Are you a roofer? Are you electrician? No, if you're not an expert in that, you shouldn't be giving expert advice on those elements. Your job as an expert is the transaction of putting the buyer and the seller into escrow, close the deal, and that's it.
If they ask me, what's your opinion, and that's your.
Yeah, never put your position of answering a question. You always throw it back. I'm not the one buying this property, unfortunately. You got to tell me what your position is. Here's a couple options. You can move forward, buy the property as is. We can put a request or a price reduction or ask for credit, or simply we can just back out. I'll have you find another property. Okay. So hopefully that answers the question. Miguel, you had another one. Does title usually confirm who can sign for the entity? No, so title will not confirm. Basically, we have to provide the necessary documentation, meaning that if there is a corporation or a trust, they need to provide a copy of the trust, provide a copy of the CC&Rs or the bylaws, and more so the articles of incorporation. That way they can review and make sure that the person that is authorized on behalf of the entity is capable of doing so. Because in the past, I've seen things slip through the cracks and someone did not do their job, and ultimately now it delays the process because someone later in the process identified that they had the wrong signer, that person was not the authorized signer. And sometimes the issue is when it's a corporation that is owned by a husband and wife, and now they get into a little situation or even a divorce. The entity still stays in place, even though they may be separated, right? They have to give us, new instructions and add new addendums to it to determine who would be the authorized party on behalf of the corporation. So title escrow will ask for copies, and once they have the copies, then they'll know, okay, so Simon does have the authorization to sign on behalf of the corporation. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Miguel. Awesome. All right. Well, that puts us at a little over 4 o'clock, folks, and I would love to continue doing so because there's still so much. Rest assured, I also have a class in July, again, that will dive deep into what we did today and just breaking it and dissecting some of the paragraphs so you understand the ins and outs. I already know where we kind of stand, so on our next RPA class, we'll kind of start from here, okay? Any final questions before we close out? Cool. All right, team, well, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. Everyone on Zoom, thank you. And if you have any questions, by all means, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.